Well, we have hit the 6 month mark of our podcast that we
Wow.
started at the first of the year. One goal that we had, Matt, was to feature guests that are far more interesting than we could ever be. I think we managed to do that. Don't you think
Oh,
so?
yeah. Every week we have somebody that's interesting, somebody that's at the top of the news. I
Yeah.
mean, it's been fun.
Yeah, and I think we've had folks too that you know, we've we've done some serious stuff, but like when we had Yuji Okumoto talking about his acting career and Karate Kid and Paper Tigers, just he was just so much fun and loose and open. So I think that's the type of thing when we were talking about people that are far more interesting than us.
Yeah, for
He
sure.
he was definitely all of that. So now we're going to test the theory of having guests far more interesting than us, because this is the first of two episodes where we, the Chino and Chicano, become the guests to talk about who we are, where we came from, things that we have experienced, and how those experiences have molded us. So hopefully our answers won't be used against us in a court of law. So, Matt, you're up. Here we go.
Okay, well, this is going to be a short episode then.
Yeah, the authorities are listening. Here we go. Well, Matt Chan, where are you from?
I'm from Portland, Oregon. I'm a Northwesterner.
So you were born and raised there?
Yep. Yeah,
So,
I'm a third generation.
okay. So tell me about that. How did your family end up in Portland?
I'm not sure. I think that's where my on my mother's side, that's where my grandfather ended up. And it's sketchy where he came from, but from my talks with him, he came to Portland from the East Coast, not from San Francisco. And I'm not sure where my dad's side came from, but they came from California for sure. And my dad was born in Sacramento, but moved to Portland when he was in grade school.
Wow. So you knew your grandfather?
I knew all my grandparents at one point. Yeah.
Wow.
But, yeah. So I did know them all.
Did they speak Chinese to you? Did they speak English?
That's really weird. I think about that a lot, and you know this too. It's like
Yeah,
you're bilingual when you're a little kid.
you are.
And so you don't really think about it. You said, well, I had conversations with my grandfather, but he didn't speak English that well. So, so I think it was both. So I understood and probably answered him in English, probably.
I think there's this kind of osmosis thing that happens. You're around them, and if you're around them enough, even though you may not, you probably do speak it, but like in my case, it was Spanglish, 'cause
Yes,
in and out,
exactly. Or
so
Chinglish and my
yeah, yeah. What do you remember about your grandparents?
I remember my grandfather on my mom's side the most because he lived with us for a while. And he was a good guy. It was fun. I mean, he was also meaner than shit, but he was good to me. He was good
Yeah.
to me. And the thing I remember the most about him is he liked me to drive him around. So even when I got my driver's license, he goes, okay, let's go the road trip to Seattle. So I'd get in his big Chrysler Newport and drive it to Seattle with him as a 16-year-old.
Oh, wow.
And one time we drove to Canada, Vancouver, so he could meet some friends.
Oh man, that would be kind of cool.
Yeah,
at that age.
In other words, I did road trips with my grandfather.
Yeah, that's a great memory to have.
Yeah.
So, how about your mom and dad? So, tell me about your parents.
Okay, my dad, he was from a hardcore Chinese working class family, and they ran meat shops. They were butchers, and they opened one of the first supermarkets in the Central Valley in California. And so he was in that business. In fact, it was so much part of the business, they didn't even let him go to high school. As soon as he graduated from 8th grade, he says, you're going to work. So he would work all the time. I mean, even as a kid, he told me he would split sides of beef when he was just little, and he had to stand on a box, put the knife in and jump off and drag the meat down the carcass.
Wow.
And, he's had the scars. I mean, he's got one of his middle fingers is chopped up. He's got a thumb that's kind of, the top is missing. So, I mean, he had scars.
So
for his job.
what was your dad's name?
Arthur or Art.
Okay. And your mom, tell me about your mom.
My mom's name was Rosie, and she, you know, again, an entrepreneur Chinese family. She talked about having to run a hand laundry. She ran numbers as a kid, you know, in Chinatown. She worked in the family's restaurants. And so she worked when she graduated from high school and had a pretty normal, you know, Portland upbringing. But there are some crazy stories, you know, like one time someone tried to rob their restaurant. And so she took a blackjack out from behind the bar. And when the guy was running out, she swung it and hit him. But what she didn't realize, it was my uncle that was running out after the guy. So she cold cocks her brother. So there's a lot of stories like that.
I met was it your Aunt Betty?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And did you guys used to call her Crazy Betty or something like that?
Probably. No, but she was very funny.
She was a hoot. Geez, she was just as like, she could have done stand-up. She was so funny, just this natural funniness about her.
Well, all the sisters, when the sisters got together, with the exception of one, when the sisters got together, they were pretty funny. I mean, they were crazy. So
was your mom a lot like her? Like Betty?
Yeah, could be serious. You know, they were similar, but very different in other ways. I mean, my mom was very simple. You know, my Aunt Betty had a little more extravagant taste.
Now, anybody that knows you, of our friends, and I'm sure your family and relatives, know that you have kind of a biting, at times caustic sense of humor.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And it's a little unfiltered, which we've heard here and there here on this podcast. Did you get that from your relatives?
No, I really don't. I don't know where that comes from. I really don't. I mean, there's a certain kind of fearlessness I developed. You know, I've told stories about racist taunts from other kids when I was in grade school. I mean, because my friends would come up and say, "Man, I'm so sorry that happened." And I go like, "What happened?" And they said, "That stuff didn't bother you?" And I go, "I really didn't think about it at the time."
Really?
Yeah, it was real interesting because I just thought I was better than them.
Really? Oh,
Yeah.
You had this sense of confidence that, you know.
Yeah, I did. You know, because I was, you know, I'm not that big. I'm like 5'8", but I grew fast. So in grade school, I was one of the bigger kids. So that helps too.
Were you intimidating, I guess?
Probably. I mean, yeah, I guess I could have been. I mean, can be intimidating now to some people, according to them.
Yeah, I can see that to some degree if they don't really know you. But let's go back and talk again about more about your family. So tell me about growing up with mom and dad and your neighborhood and in Portland. Being, you know, were you in a Chinese neighborhood, or was there a Chinese neighborhood in Portland?
Oh, yeah, there were, but we weren't in a Chinese neighborhood at all. I mean, I think there was one other Asian family within like a 5-block radius, and that was it. But it was very much working class. It was great because for some reason, every house on my street had boys that were all our same age. So we would just hang out all day long and hang out, and it was fun. So it was a pretty normal childhood in that sense, you know.
Did you realize that you weren't white?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I realized that, but it for some reason, for all these kids, it didn't matter, and their parents, it didn't matter. So, because my folks were pretty Americanized. In fact, it was interesting because later on, people that recalled my folks, they would say, "Oh, yeah, your parents were so modern."
Really?
Yeah. And I'm like, "Oh, what does that mean?" But
yeah,
I have no idea what that meant, but you know, they weren't stodgy, I guess.
So did your mom and dad want you to be more American than being Chinese, or did they reinforce your Chinese and you should value that as well?
No, they didn't. I didn't have to go to Chinese school or any of that stuff. I mean, we had Chinese food, you know, for dinner, not a whole lot, but you know, I mean, enough. And it was interesting. My parents didn't really speak Chinese to me or my sister. I mean, I think my mom would speak Chinese. If she was mad, she'd be yelling it in Chinese at us. But that would be about it. My dad, in fact, my dad never spoke Chinese. And then later on one time, and this was when I was an adult, we were someplace and he started speaking Chinese to someone. I go like, dude, I didn't know you could speak Chinese. He goes, well, what do you think? So he could speak Chinese, and but it was never a big deal for us. I mean, I think my parents had one conversation with me. He goes, well, we'd prefer you married a Chinese person, but whatever. But as far as career choices, they never said anything about it.
They didn't say, we want you to be a doctor or an
No.
optometrist or a lawyer.
I mean, it's interesting. My mom probably went to her grave when she passed away, never fully understanding what I did for a living.
Yeah.
She knew I did TV shows and she could watch them and see my name, but she didn't really know what the job was. Because I remember she would ask my wife, Guy, a lot. She goes, what does he do?
Yeah, I can relate to that totally, because I don't think my parents did either. They just knew I was on the radio or on the television, and that was, so that was a cool thing to them, but they didn't understand how it happened. They just, check on whether you were there or not. So are you more like your dad or your mom?
I think early on I was more like my mom, but as I get older, I'm more like my dad. And like we were talking about that, I don't remember him grunting when he sits up or moves around, but I sort of do that. So I don't know, that's old age, but yeah, I think as I get older, I'm more like my dad.
And were you a good kid? Were you a smart ass with them, or did they whomp you much because you were a smart ass, or what?
No, I mean, there was really no corporal punishment in my family, right? If you ask my mom, I was an angel. If you ask my dad, not so much. And I think I was just a normal kid, right? I mean, you're neither good nor bad. You're just stupid.
Yeah.
So you do stupid stuff.
Yeah.
Oh,
okay. You have a sister. You had a sister. She passed away. Tell me about your sister.
My sister, it was tough being a woman or a girl, right, in a Chinese family, and being the firstborn. She had it tougher. There were more expectations on her, and
more rules,
and we weren't. And it was funny because we weren't anything alike at all. Really? In fact, once she went away, once she graduated from high school and then went to college, we really never communicated much after that, because she's 2 years older. And, so she was kind of around, but I really wasn't part of my life until later on when I moved back to Seattle. I got to see her a little bit more.
What was her name?
Madeline. And she has 3 kids. So, I look after, my nieces and nephews.
Yeah. Now she passed away. Has it been 2 years or more?
Oh, a little over 2 years, I think.
Right. I remember that time. That was a tough time for you, but that's the life thing that we all have to deal with at times. Do you think you were close with your parents?
No, not like I see some people that are really close to their parents.
Mm-hmm.
I probably wanted to be a little more closer, but and you probably experienced this too. When you step out of the box of your family box, you kind of leave that behind, mm-hmm. because they don't understand the world you're occupying, the intense world of white people, and that's what it is. I mean, it was totally out of their comfort level. I mean, they have white friends and stuff, but never having to operate fully and make a living in a white world. And I think that separated us, because they just, they would ask questions and I'd answer it. And they just look at you and just go, I don't even understand what's going on.
Did they ever warn you or tell you about racism?
Probably, but it wasn't like a big deal. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a big deal, but I think they did say stuff. I mean, as a kid, you just don't understand that, especially when there weren't other kids of color. So you don't know that you're being singled out necessarily. I remember I'd be just coming home at night from basketball practice, and cops would stop me. And I get in the car with them and they question me. And I'm thinking like, hey, this is a cop car. This is fine. And then they talk to me and then they go, okay, get out of here. And they let me go. And I'm thinking like, okay, that was weird. And I don't even think I ever told my parents, but that happened a number of times in Portland.
Wow.
And I'm just thinking back now and I go, well, that was totally racist, big profile. Cause I'm just an Asian kid bouncing a ball going home and it's night. Cause we had an evening practice from the grade school, but that was strange. So it was all around me, but like I said, for some reason, it wasn't until I was older and got into college when I really sort of saw it.
So when did you realize, or did you have a racist experience that really hit you?
There was one. I remember one time a friend and I went to apply to be baggers at a grocery store, and he got the job instantly, and I just never got a call back. And at that point, I go like, I'm the same guy as this guy, how come? And the job's still open. So I kind of knew that was sort of a racist thing. I mean, I kind of felt that. And then it wasn't until I was working in Oregon Public Broadcasting, and I went in and asked for a raise from the head guy. And he called me inscrutable for asking for the raise. And I went like, fuck you. What are you calling me inscrutable for? Because that clearly is a racist trope.
Right. Yes. The inscrutable Chinese.
Yes, exactly. And so
Oriental.
I never forgot that part. Or, you're too hungry, or you're this, or you're that. But stuff that they would never say to a white guy.
Yeah. What was your high school like?
Very mixed. It was not like, a ghetto school by any means, but it was pretty mixed. It would be like Franklin High School would be the closest high school.
And when you say mixed, being
Asian, Latino, Black, white, yeah. And very from working class, and then Reed College was in the neighborhood. So you had a lot of professors' kids. So it was very mixed. I mean, and back then I was on, they had those tracks, right? So once I hit high school, there were friends and other people that I never even saw for 4 years because they would be in different tiers of classes. And I was always in the top tier. And so I pretty much stayed with the classmates I had when I started. Yeah. But so that was kind of interesting too. So it was sort of segregated within the school.
Being the smart kids and
or theoretically the smart
kids. Or the smart ass kids in your case.
It was shocking to me because I didn't know that. Because I remember one time I got misplaced into a C-level English class. And the counselor says, well, we got to pull you out. They're like, no, I like this because I never get to see these people. And they had a reading assignment and said, okay, well, this is a book we're reading for the semester. And I read it one weekend. And so I just cruised the rest of the time.
So were you a popular kid or social kid?
I was sort of social. I mean, I was pretty much like I am now, right? So that's probably, kind of an acquired taste. But I mean, I had, the friends I had were my friends, and I didn't try to be popular. In fact, I remember I had a neighbor that I grew up with, he was a big time football player, good looking guy. And we were always friends since we were little kids. And I remember one time I was walking home and he's driving a bunch of people home and he said, hey, you need a ride? And so, yeah, sure. So I get in and they're like giving me this look and he told me, he goes, yeah, they're asking like, how do you know that guy? What did you pick him up for? And he's like, he's my neighbor. He goes, I know him, so it's kind of interesting.
That's interesting. Did you date a lot?
No, not at all.
Really?
Not at all. No.
How come?
Because I don't know. I was shy and there was never an opportunity for me, and probably because I was high most of the time. I don't know.
So did you drink and smoke and all that in high school?
Yes, of course. I mean, this is the Vietnam era, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Late what, late 60s, early 70s, right in there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I
yeah.
mean, it was kind of, and you live in a fairly big city, so it's available.
Right. You're in an urban area,
Yeah.
so yeah, I would, yeah, it's a lot different from where I grew up, that's for
Hmm.
sure. Um, did did you know what you wanted to do when you were in high school or what you wanted to be?
I knew what I wanted to be, and I know what I liked, but I didn't do that to begin with. Um, I mean, I always had a fascination with electronics, radios, TVs, and shows, TV shows. I mean, I started making movies in high school. But when I graduated, I decided I was going to become a geology major.
Really?
Yeah, because I figured, that's, I don't know. There's that Asian thing, right? Become an engineer, do this and that, and so I was taking physics and all this other stuff. And then I remember one time going out on a field trip with a bunch of guys out to the Oregon coast in a geology class. And these guys get out of their van and they're going, "Oh, look at this rock, look at that." And I'm looking at these guys and I said, I am never going to be as into this as these guys are.
Yeah.
So I just said at that point, I says, I'm going to go look for something. I want to be a filmmaker. So I was at the University of Oregon and they had like one film course and it was full. And I was walking around and there was this professor, guy named Ron Sheriff, and he says, "Hey," he goes, "why don't you try broadcast?" And so I said, "Okay, that's close enough." And so I took the courses and I became a broadcast major.
And did you know that you wanted to be a behind the scenes guy or what did you know you wanted to do?
Oh, always behind the scenes. I mean, look, I've got a face for radio, right? Or podcast. So it's not like, it's not like I had a big view. I'm not Enrique Cerna, right?
Yeah, well, who knows? I mean, everybody has a different side of things and interests.
Yeah, but they weren't letting the Hunchback of Notre Dame host TV shows.
All right, so you go to the University of Oregon, right?
Yes.
Okay. Why did you decide to go there?
Because that's where my friends went, and that was the most liberal school, right, in Oregon that we could afford. I mean, you got to understand, I mean, I'm from an immigrant family still, even though they were modern. And so I applied to colleges myself. I didn't have any help. And I actually was accepted into Columbia.
Wow.
And I looked at it and the price was pretty high, even though there's financial aid. And then just the thought of going to New York, because I'd never even been to New York. I didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
And that far away and not having any friends and stuff. So I decided I'm going to go to Oregon. But, I was accepted to a couple of other colleges, but I just, Oregon was the place to go.
And what did mom and dad think about you going to college? Were they like, you got to go to college? You're going no matter what?
No, I think that was important to go to college.
Yeah.
They never said that because there was never any question that I wouldn't be going to college, because that's the people I hung around with, right? Because I was in the top tier, we're all going to college. So of course you go to college. I mean, a lot of your success in school and your ability to go to college depends on who you hang out with.
Yeah, that's very true.
At that, especially then.
At that age, yeah, definitely.
I mean, I did, it was funny because towards the end of my high school career, I was taking shop classes because I was bored with the other stuff. So I'd be in with these guys who are like, "What are you doing in here?" And I go like, "Hey, I could take shop," So I studied how to wire a house and do plumbing and stuff. So it was very practical.
Right. Yeah, that's good. That's good. I always wish that I don't know if they even had this when I was in high school, but I wish they would have had like cooking classes or something like that. Just to, I mean, I knew how to do some basics, but it would have been fun to just do something else that I could use later in life. And then speaking of food, you're a pretty good cook.
Yeah. I've become a good cook. Yeah.
Okay.
I've even taught cooking classes.
I know. And you shoot some of the stuff that you create, mainly Chinese food, and you put these videos up. Where did the food interest come from?
Just being hungry. No, I mean, really, because, when you're living, because I was living in Corvallis for a while and other places, and, and you didn't have the money to go out to restaurants and stuff. Right. So you just kind of learn how to cook stuff, and Chinese food seemed pretty easy. And it is really easy. you know.
Did your parents show you how to make stuff?
No, I mean, I called my mom up every once in a while, but she wasn't like a great cook. I mean, she had a couple of dishes. What I found out later, my dad was a great cook, but she never let him in the kitchen.
Really?
Yeah. So once my mom passed away, my dad started cooking and he rocked it. I mean, he made pies, he baked, he did everything.
My dad was a really good cook too. Um, so in college, I mean, were you serious about school or having a good time or what?
I was somewhat serious about school because it was tougher than high school, but still, school was never tough for me. I mean, I'll admit that. I mean, I don't even remember studying, because it was not that hard. So it was lucky I was in broadcasting because I was doing more project oriented stuff.
Yeah.
And I could write, so that was good. Because that helps you in college a lot if you could write.
It does.
But
it does.
I mean, that is a skill. So I was just able to concentrate on craft. And so when I graduated, I was one of two people that were recruited and got a job right out of graduation.
So what was the first job?
I ended up going to Oregon Public Broadcasting, and they moved me to Corvallis to do morning news, radio news. And I wasn't trained for that at all. I mean, I knew how to operate a board, right? But then I had to literally do rip and read, where you would have the copy come off the teletype and you would tear the stories up into little things and read them. I was shitty. I mean, and I'd come on, my shift would start at 5 a.m. and I would, and then I'd get off by 10 or so. And then I go fishing and go back and fall asleep and get up the next morning. I remember one time I was so always worried about getting up early that I set my alarm and I woke up, but the alarm hadn't gone off and it said 5. It said 5. No, it said 6 o'clock. And I went, oh shit, I'm late for work. So I get in my car, race to work. I go in the building, run up the stairs, and the evening guy's there. And he looks at me, goes, what are you doing here? He goes, I missed my shift. And he goes, your shift is at 5 a.m. It's 7:30 in the evening. And I went like, oh shit. I was so focused that I didn't even realize it was at evening.
So how long were you there?
About 6 months, until they realized I was so shitty at it that they actually had to they gave me a job in Portland in being a kind of a floor director. So I finally went up and was able to practice what I knew, lighting and studio production and stuff like that.
And how long were you there in that position?
I was there for about 3.5, 4 years. And the thing that was really rewarding about that, it was during the time where Corporation for Public Broadcasting was really trying to promote minorities. And I was able to get what they call a CPB scholarship. And what they did was they funded a position for me for 2 years where I rotated and did every job in the station.
Wow.
And so that's why I knew as much as I did, because I learned every part of it, from development to promotions to being an engineer to running master control. So it was a pretty fascinating gig. It was fun too.
So the first time I met you, I was on a hiring committee at KCTS. I was working at King, and I actually had not been at King that long, but I got called and asked to be a part of a hiring committee. And I can't remember if the position was for a documentary producer or a director, but anyway,
I think it was a director.
Well, yeah. Okay. And you came in and you didn't get the job, but you were very confident in going for the whole thing. And so you were definitely one of the people that they considered.
Really
yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. No,
I don't even remember meeting a committee.
Really?
No, I just remember sitting in Bernie Clark's office talking to him. That's about it.
It was, I think, just 2 or 3 of us that met with you and just asked you about the position. They ended up giving it to somebody that was already in-house, but you obviously had the skills to do that position, at least from what we could tell. But it was kind of like we knew all along that it was going to be somebody in house, but we went through the process, and then it was probably a year later when you pop up at King,
Hmm.
and you were hired to be the public service
Coordinator, right?
PSA coordinator. Yeah,
Yeah.
and uh, you were there just a short time, but made quite an impression
Yeah, 11
because
months.
yeah, because the spots you were producing were just like commercial spots. I mean, they were far and above what had the people producing those before were really not very good. And you took it to a whole new level. Plus, you had you had this kind of confidence that rubbed some people the wrong way. And I remember the guy that was the head of the production department, who we both know, who's now since deceased. Um, I think he didn't like you because he thought you were too well. The deal was is that the two of you were a lot alike. You were
Yeah, thanks.
A personalities, kind of like very self confident, and so there was, you knew you're going to butt your heads, but it was an interesting time because you were there such a short amount of time, but yet you made this real splash.
Yeah, it was fun. I mean, I learned, because I had just come off that CPB grant, and
Yeah.
I think I was shifted into the daytime program director at OPB in Oregon. And then I was out of production. I was an administrator, and I didn't like that. So when I had a chance to go to King in Seattle, which is another story,
Yeah.
I ended up there, and I got back into it, and I got my hands on the first DMX computer editing system.
Right. Yeah.
And that's
First
where I really
production. Yeah.
fell in love with editing. And so I ultimately left King to go be an editor in San Francisco.
Right. But you
And
knew the post production system better than I think some of the guys that were the operators.
oh yeah,
And most of the people there didn't really understand it, but you understood it to the point of really being able to manipulate and do so much with it that it kind of blew people away. And I think also the person that we were talking about, he was, I think that bothered him because he didn't hire you. You weren't
yeah, I think
his
that was
guy.
it.
Yeah.
Because I was hired by the public affairs department.
Right, right, yeah, and
Yeah.
they knew shit about production.
Oh
They
no,
didn't.
they
They
didn't
didn't
know.
know. They didn't know anything. They were pretty much all kind of deep content thinkers, or
Deep content.
I don't know if they were that deep, or they were faux deep content
Yeah.
people. But yeah, you came in and really showed people how to do production. So where did that come from?
Again, I had a fascination with machines. I mean, I loved machines, like audio recorders, video recorders. I mean, I love that stuff. And so I really took the time to study it. I mean, I still do. I mean, I'm addicted to YouTube videos on editing and shooting and stuff just to keep learning. I mean, because I think if you don't keep improving your skills, even to the grave, right? At some point you're hanging it up, and there's just so
Right.
much to learn. And so that kind of fueled me through my career. I mean, as always, just to prove people wrong and to just keep getting better.
Now, you and I became friends during that time, and then, we kept this friendship for all these years. But I think, and we've talked about this before, but I remember being at a party with the public affairs people at King, and they were a unique group, if you know what I mean. And but you and I started talking, and we hit it off quite well. And we've talked about this before, but I think a lot of it had to do is that we were the only two people of color
Oh yeah.
in the room. And I remember uh, another person that we know saying, "Oh, well, you and Matt sure hit it off well." And I and I do remember saying, "Well, we're kind of a lot alike in some respects because of where we come from and our,
Mm-hmm.
our backgrounds." And you know, we didn't go to Harvard. We didn't go to, because a lot of those people back then in that group,
Oh,
not
total
all of them,
Ivy League. Yeah.
yeah, there was like the Ivy League stuff, and they were and they kind of like to let you know about that. But I think the fact too that we were, two people of color in a very white environment,
uh,
which really
to
was
this
what we
day,
existed.
still a
Yeah.
white environment.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so.
I mean, you were on your side, you were at TV stations which were more integrated. So I was in production, private, production and TV station management. And it was a rarefied atmosphere, let me tell you. Even going up through all the TV stations, there were no role models. There was nobody that I saw of color, of any color other than white, that was in positions of power. And so as I rose up, it was all new. Every job was new. And you just you did it by yourself. And that was really, really tough. People don't get how tough that is. I mean, people whine about solidarity and this and that. And like, that's great because you have colleagues. When you have no one, that's the loneliest feeling in the world.
We didn't have mentors. And
No.
in your area, there were really, it was rare to see a person of color in a management position in the production and management. And in the news programming area, particularly if you're doing on air, there would be some people of color, but we were never in positions of power. Well, might be on the air, but even then, there were very few of us. And you're right. We didn't have mentors. We didn't have mentors. Yeah.
I mean, it was funny because I sort of had mentors, but it really wasn't. It was just white guys who helped me out because I could make them look good. Right. I mean, so it wasn't really a mentorship in the fact that they actually had it in their hearts to help me. And they may have, but it still benefited them. I remember one time a general manager, because I was a station manager and I was hiring a lot of agents. He goes, "Hey, you got to check yourself on that because you don't want anybody to say you're hiring too many of your people." And I'm going like, what the fuck, dude? They're the smartest people you're going to find.
Right.
Yeah. So, and even to this day, it's hard to find people of color in the broadcast or, media industry that have chops that are equal because it's just not their career paths.
Right. And it's still few and far between. I mean, it is increasing some, and what's happened recently has, I think, put more focus there, but it's, I don't know, it is still too few. That's the bottom line of that. Okay. So back to you. So you were a king, you left to go to San Francisco. You're part of the heyday of local programming there as an editor. Then you become a producer. Then eventually you go into some management. How many jobs have you had? How many times?
I have had more jobs than I can count. I mean, I've pretty much done every job in a TV station with the exception of accounting and traffic, probably.
Wow.
So that's why I know the business so well. And it's been good because that's one of my survival techniques is that you got to know everything about your job so you can call bullshit on people.
Right.
I mean, that's sort of a survival kind of asshole attitude, but I think you need to be able to do that because you're in a position by yourself that you're left out that's what buddy of mine would say, you're left on the ice flow, and sometimes you don't have a way off and you got to figure it out. And, when I went fully into production after I left the TV station side and started Screaming Philly Productions, if it wasn't for my agent, who I've had for decades, he held my hand through a lot of it because I didn't know anything. I would make calls. You'd fly into New York, go to a network, and then pitch them ideas and stuff. And that made me sick to my stomach because talk about code switching.
Right.
Having to code switch to that degree to sell an idea and totally perform in those meetings was draining for me. And so when I gave it up finally, and I was very successful. I mean, Hoarders is one of the landmark shows in reality TV, and that's part of my legacy. But, it's been a great career for me, but it took its toll. Yeah.
I want to step back and come back to Hoarders. During the time that you were building on your career in the television part of things, working for stations, uh, did you get fired?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I've been fired. Let's see, one, two, three times.
And were they firings based on what?
One, they just decided to move on and offer me a lower position. I said, screw you, and then just left. So I got fired from there. And then another time, I just was, if it was probably my fault, but I just wasn't happy, wasn't satisfied, and kept pushing to do other things. And finally, they've had enough. And I actually got a settlement out of it because it was a wrongful termination because they had falsified stuff in my file. So that was one. And then another one is just, I got laid off because, just corporate layoffs, and they didn't see me fitting into the new management structure, because I was a person of color and they just didn't think I had it in me. So, I mean, that's sort of how I started Screaming Flea, when the Belo Corporation acquired all these stations and Wall Street looked at them, and the analyst said my division, the production division, was the gem in their acquisitions because it had the most upside. Well, of course, they didn't understand it. So this group traded away the Food Network. They had the Food Network, and they traded away for a TV station in Austin because they wanted to have more TV stations in Texas where they're based. And then, they said, oh, well, we're going to cut your company because you're not profitable. Although we were making, I think at the time I had 7 employees and we were making $4 million a year. So if you figure out how much per employee that was bringing in, they said, well, it's still not enough, because they couldn't figure out how the metrics work because we weren't a TV station. So I ended up buying my division from them for $27,000, not knowing that I had a contract in my pocket for $2.5 million.
They didn't know that.
No, they didn't know that. And so I said, okay. And I bought the company, all the assets, and launched Screaming Flea. And 14 years later, the company was doing $25 million a year in production.
When you had that contract in your pocket, the $1 million one, or what, 2 million you said, was that Hoarders?
No, that was a show called Gardening by the Yard. It was a gardening show.
Oh, wow.
And that's another funny story, because it was a show that it used humor in gardening. Usually it's some stiff, from the ag department going like, don't forget to prune, and all that composting is your friend, that thing. But this thing was hilarious. And they had no ratings at the time, so they couldn't figure out what was going on. So they said, after one season, they go like, well, we don't know about this show. It doesn't really fit our mold and stuff. And I said, we're not going to go on with it. So I said, fine. We'll just keep moving on. I was doing other shows at the time. And then I got a call from the head of the network, and he said, congratulations. He goes, you guys just were nominated for a Cable Ace Award.
Wow.
And the other guy, the program guy, was on the call. And I said, great, that's wonderful. He goes, yeah, we want you to come to the celebration. And if you win, you can accept the award and stuff. I'm like, okay. He goes, yeah, we're looking forward to the next set of shows. And then I go, oh, really? And the guy on the other line goes, well, that's an issue. And he goes, well, why? He says, well, we canceled it. And and there was dead silence. And I said, don't worry about it. He goes, we'll talk about it. I'm cool. And so we did. And I doubled the price on him and just leveraged the shit out of him. and the show was on the air for 12 years.
Wow. Yeah. So now to Hoarders. So you're in Japan and you're watching morning television in Japan.
Yes.
And you see what will then, it creates the little thing in your brain that says, I got a show here and this is going to be Hoarders.
Yeah. It was I just looked at the emotion and I said, this is really compelling television. So I came back from Japan and I started, and it was a sort of a Good Morning America show. And they were looking at some house that was just a mess in a neighborhood. And so the city came and cleaned it up. There were rats, rotting food, everything. And it was great television. So I came back and I started researching it, and I said, wow, there's this disorder called hoarding. And I started looking into it, and I go, like, damn, there's houses like that everywhere. So I pitched it to A&E, and they said, oh, this is a good idea, but can you make it a lifestyle show? And I go, we need a lifestyle show. Well, where you would clean their house up and do a reveal before and after. And I said, that's not really what the show's about. There's a psychological dimension. And they said, oh, well, this is what we want. So they gave me money to do the pilot. I did the pilot, and it was brutal because we did a story. It was about a nurse who had died in her apartment, and she had like 14 pets of different sorts. And she died, and she was dead for like, 4 weeks or something.
Ugh.
And they finally got into the apartment, and all the animals had left her body alone, but they started eating each other. So they had to go into this thing and clean it up. They brought in her sister to identify the body who hadn't seen her in 6 years. And then we do a cleanup and this whole thing. And they go, yeah, the show is pretty compelling, but it doesn't work as a lifestyle show. And I go, I know, I told you. So then the Biography Network stepped in, which was I guess A&E's the parent network. And so it's a secondary network. And the guy goes, I like your idea. He goes, I'll give you the money to do the pilot the way you want to do it. So we redid the pilot, and it was sort of much like how Hoarders is today. And they ran it in the middle of the night, and it did the biggest number they've ever had. Then they didn't believe it. So they ran it again without promotion. It popped another number. And then A&E goes, we want the show. So I said, the contract says it's double the price if you take it. And they go, I know. And so it went on the air, and within 3 weeks, we were on Oprah because it trended so heavily and became a deal. And now the term hoarders is like a term people use. Oh, he's a hoarder.
Right.
So
it's in the dictionary.
I know. So what better kind of compliment could you have? And then there are obviously the knockoffs after it, but yeah, it's still on the air.
We can all say that we've probably got a relative or a friend or somebody that is a hoarder in some respect.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's for sure. Okay, so Hoarders, was Hoarders the highlight of your career?
No, it wasn't.
What is?
The highlight of my career is when I went to a TV station to run a TV station in Sacramento. It was a sleepy, shitty TV station. But at the time I was commuting between Sacramento and San Francisco, and I said, I just want to stay put. So there's a TV station in Sacramento had an opening, and the guy liked me. He goes, hey, this is way above this is way below your pay grade, what He goes, but if you're willing to do it, come on in. So I did that. And I took the station within just like a year and a half from last place to competing for first place. And a lot of crew, people don't know this, but between newscasts, the crew would just sit around, drinking coffee, doing nothing. Right.
Oh yeah.
and so I said, well, I'm going to put you guys to work. So I trained them. I would have classes during their breaks on how to produce TV shows. And so we started doing TV shows, and they were syndicated nationally. It's where I found Lisa Ling. I did a kids show, and Lisa
Ling, huh?
Yeah, she was cast in a kids show that we did. So what happened was we went to the Emmys one year, and I think this crappy little production department from a small station in Sacramento, in competing in the fifth market, we won like 11 Emmys. We cleaned up. And that was the most gratifying thing. And our news hit was the best newscast in the whole market.
Nice.
So that was sort of the achievement, because I was able to take this ragtag crew of people that were sort of like, I didn't even know why you're in TV, and turned them into a production powerhouse. And a lot of those producers went on to pretty good careers.
Wow. That's great. That's really great. Okay. So you're married. How long have you been married?
Oh, see, you had to ask that. It's over 30, pushing 40 years.
You're supposed to know that right off the top, dude.
I know.
Who's more high maintenance, you or Guy, your wife?
It depends, right? We're both high maintenance. So of course I'm going to say she is, right? But I think the truth be known, I probably am, because, a creative guy, so I'm crazy half the time.
um, what is unique about Guy?
That she put up with me for all these years. I mean, you know,
she should get an award, a
well,
financial award for that.
I mean, it's funny because I've had a pretty interesting career. I mean, I've moved like 12, 13 times, you know, a lot of different jobs, and she was there for most of it.
Yeah.
And she was always supportive. She's never said, no, don't do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the only time I actually returned down a job was Althea, my daughter, was in high school. She just became a cheerleader. And I got a job to be the program director at the Superstation in New York, WWOR.
Wow.
You know, and they really courted me. And I said, yeah, you know, we'll buy you a place, we'll get you cars and all this. And I'm thinking about that. And then I went home and I thought about it. I can't do that to my daughter. I can't uproot her for me. I'm okay where I'm at. But you can't do that to your kids, right? So I didn't take the job, and I'm glad I did because it worked out. I mean, I got fired from the job I was at, you know, or laid off, but it started me on a career that was really what I started out to do, be a production guy.
Yeah, and to be your own boss.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty interesting to end your career doing what you actually wanted to do as a passion in your life.
Right. So you're a dad and you're a grandfather. What's the best thing about being a dad?
Seeing your kids do okay. I mean, I've had this conversation with a lot of people, and it's like, you know, the best you can hope for is that your kids turn out to be happy and good people. Yeah. Because when you hear stories of people that have troubled kids, man, that's a lifetime of challenge. And I don't have that, thankfully.
Yeah. And being a grandpa?
Oh, it's the best because all the stuff you missed while you're working with your kids, you get to double down on with your grandkids. You get to spoil them. You get to love them. Like you love your grandkids, I think, more than your own kids because your own kids piss you off. Grandkids, you never piss you off.
Right. And you can,
no matter how crazy they get,
you can spoil the hell out of them and hand them back. All right. Okay. So we're going to wrap things up here. And I want to ask you some rapid fire questions. I want you to give me a yes or no answer or just a short answer. So here we go. Favorite movie?
Stand By Me.
Favorite actor, women or men?
Favorite actor, Denzel Washington.
Favorite musical group or musician?
Oh, I still like the Beatles.
Can you dance?
I think I can. I used to be able to.
Favorite food?
Chinese food.
Best what in particular?
You know, any kind of noodle dish. I love Chinese noodles.
Best Chinese food in town besides what you make?
Boy, that's hard to say because it depends on what you want, but I would say Purple Dot's pretty good.
Okay. Favorite professional sports team?
Seahawks.
Favorite athlete?
Oh, that's an interesting one. I don't know. I think Russell Wilson.
Favorite color?
Blue.
Favorite vacation place?
Hawaii.
Best thing you ever produced?
The best thing I ever produced. Well, it's got to be Hoarders.
Worst thing you ever produced?
A thing called Escaping the Cult. I was brought in to fix a series that someone else had started, and it was a mess. And I got it on the air, but it wasn't great.
Do you like white people?
Some. I mean,
how would you convince St. Peter that you should be allowed through the pearly gates of heaven?
Because I told the truth about life.
How do you want to be remembered?
You know, just someone who uses skills to help people.
All right. Oh, where did the name Matty Rotten come from?
Oh my God. That was a time when we put together a makeshift band and I sang the blues, and that they started calling me Matty Rotten, and that kind of
was in
stuck.
San Francisco. I
San
remember seeing
Francisco.
some video of that. Yeah.
Oh my God, does that exist?
I saw it, so it must be out there someplace.
Wow.
All right, Matt Chan, El Chino, thank you so much for talking to me. And I guess I'm going to be on deck next time as we can continue this conversation. This is part one, part two coming up of who are Chino Y Chicano. Thanks, Matt.
Cool. Thank you.
All right.